In this video, I'm going to show you how to add Google Fonts to your project. Now, Google Fonts has a really wide selection of fonts available to you. It's very easy to use and it's very reliable. I recommend having a look through Google Fonts to see what free fonts are available for your project first. I'll be doing a video on using Adobe fonts, but I would always recommend them as a secondary option. The reason being is that you need a subscription to use the Adobe fonts. So if, for instance, you're collaborating with other people who want to do some work with the project and stuff, and they don't have access to it, just say, you're designing a fantastic website. They might be doing the t-shirts or something like that, and they don't have access to the Adobe font. It creates huge problems. Google Fonts are freely available. Like I said, most websites use them. That would always be my go-to. Also, and this is just based on my personal experience and from fixing student projects over the different semesters, they tend to have fewer errors, fewer bugs, whereas Adobe, sometimes I've actually had entire fonts disappear while students have been using them. So, just be cautious in using Adobe. Certainly if there's a particular font that you completely love that is perfect for your project, by all means, then you can use the Adobe font. But if it's, much of a muchness, I'd go for the Google font all the time personally. So this is the project I'm starting with. As you can see from the HTML, I've added some text. I've got an H1, H2, H3 and paragraph tag in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop on over to Google, find some appropriate fonts and show you how to apply the different fonts to your page. So let's open a new tab and I'm going to go to fonts.google.com. So just a reminder, it is fonts.google.com. You can also do a web search for Google Fonts and that will find it. Okay, so choosing your Google Fonts. Now, the wonderful thing is you don't have to go through 1023 different families to find your font. First, you can decide what category it is. So are you looking for serif, sans serif, display, handwriting, or monospace? Now, I would recommend steering clear of the last three, display, handwriting, and monospace. Display is very hard to read. It may look fancy, but at the end of the day, we're trying to create usable, readable websites, and display does not help. Similarly, handwriting does not help with readability. Monospace, unless you're really looking for that dated look, I would recommend not monospace either. Now also, play around with a few fonts to, do some research online. There are websites that recommend font pairings where you can find really nice combinations. You may decide you want to do the old-fashioned thing, which is pairing a serif heading with a sans serif body text and vice versa. But there are many, many options for having a heading font and a body text font complement each other. I actually recommend finding the body text font first because that is going to be the bulk of your website if you have a lot of text on your website. Similarly for print work, I always go for the body text first because it's actually easier to match a really nice heading font to a body text font rather than going the other way around. That's my experience anyway. So what you can do though is some of these serif and sans serif families actually pair up. So I believe, let's see, we've got Roboto there. Is there a Roboto? I don't think Roboto has a serif, but there are a few different serif fonts that have matching sans serif. So I'm just trying to find, here we go, Roboto Slab. I was right. There is a serif Roboto that would go very, very nicely with the sans serif Roboto. In fact, let's go and use them. So what you do first is you click through, and I've decided I want to use Roboto with the sans serif as my body text. It's quite a nice one, as you can see. Now be cautious of using thin because it can be really, really light and difficult to read unless you increase the font size there. So I think light would be fine though, so let's add light. If you need to use italic for anything, do remember to add that as well. As you add these individual fonts, because remember, a font family is a typeface. That's a collection of different fonts. Using the old-fashioned print terminology, each of these is a separate font. Light Italic 300 is a different font to Light 300. And this is because in the olden days when we had the old-fashioned lead slugs and lead print cast, they actually would be completely different objects that you needed to use for printing, so they were different fonts. Now it's a little bit more blurred, the terminology, because everything is digital, or almost everything is digital. But generally a typeface is a collection of fonts that come together to form a font family. So anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is as you add these individual fonts, it takes longer to download. So don't go over the top and select all of them just in case you're going to need them. Decide which ones you're going to use ahead of time and select those and those alone. So I'm going to select the light for my body text, and I'm just going to select that one because I'm not planning on using italic at all. So as you add that one, you see that this opens, this little menu to the side. I can close that again and I can open it again as well. There we go, just by using this little show and hide icon, which is really unclear and unhelpful in its design. Okay, so we've got the font here. Now down here we've got the one selected here, so you can add more styles or you can remove all. In fact, let's go and add some more styles first. So we don't want to add more Roboto styles or fonts. What I want to do is find the Roboto slab serif. There's also Roboto condensed. So there's a few different selections you can put together that can work very nice. So there we go. It can be very useful to find a family that has all of these different fonts in it, because they will work together very nicely. Okay, so I'm thinking as a subheading, the semi-bold would look pretty good. And I'm thinking extra bold. Oh, actually black. Let's go really, really, really strong with that. Okay, so if we have a look to the right here, we've got Roboto and we've got light as the style that's going to be downloaded. And we've got Roboto slab, semi-bold and black. So we've got 3 different fonts or 3 different styles there. So the first thing you need to know is, okay, have a look here. To embed a font, copy the code into the head of your HTML. We don't have a head section in our HTML in Codepen, but there is a place you can paste this. So you select all of that and you copy it. I'm going Command C because I'm on a Mac, so you copy that. It'll be Control C on a PC. So while we don't have head tags to paste it within in Codepen, you can go into Settings and HTML. And you see how here we've got stuff for head. Paste it in there. And then we're going to save and close. Wonderful. Now it's done nothing. We've still got that hideous default Times or Times New Roman here. So how do we activate it? We have to use the CSS. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit so you can see me typing. So we've created that link tag that talks about our different fonts. Now we need to say how we're going to use it. Now I usually start off by defining the overall font that you want as a fallback for all the text on your page, because otherwise if I say, well, I want this for the H1, this for the H2, this for the H3 and this for the paragraph, and I forget to put, for instance, caption or link or some other esoteric tag that ends up on the page, the esoteric one I don't mention is going to end up Times New Roman. Whereas if I say in the body, I want this as the general font to be using, that will be the default and it will just change it for everything else. So I believe the default I want to use would be the plain old Roboto. So let's go over here, and if we zoom down, you can see we've got CSS rules to specify families. Hooray! So I want the one for Roboto, not Roboto slab at this stage. I'm going to select that and copy it. And then I go in here and I paste it, and we should see, ta-da! It updates it, and it's changed all of the text. I'll explain how this works. This is the font family it's going to choose, and its first choice is Roboto. It basically creates a list, and this list is the fonts it should try and use in order of preference. So its first preference is Roboto. Now, the next preference and last preference is a generic sans serif. So in CSS, there are generic font families. So serif, sans serif, monospace, handwritten or script, I can't remember which one it is, and display, I think. Now, the problem with having that is that that relies on the good taste and style of a browser. Browsers have no taste and no style. So you are just as likely to suddenly end up with Arial rather than Helvetica or, something a little bit more tasteful. So what you need to do is create a font stack in order of preference to have graceful degradation. If the first one breaks, what's the second choice? If the second choice breaks, what's the third? I usually use 4 choices in there. So I've got Roboto. Let's say our second choice will be Helvetica. Our third choice may be Tahoma. And then we might even say Arial, Shudder as our, here I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've got 4 choices in there. And that is playing it safe in web design. Now let's create a different font for the headings. So here we'll go H1 because we want to change the top level heading. And for that we want that Roboto slab. So we go over here and we get the Roboto slab instructions, which are just down here. So you can see that there, the CSS rules to specify families. I'm going to pop that one in there. And there we go. How fab is that? So we've got Roboto slab. What's our other, we might decide on something like impact as our second choice, etc. And, what else? Franklin Gothic? I can't even remember. Isn't that terrible? Okay. So these are some of the options you may want to use. You can also look up some good font stacks online. There's nothing wrong with researching to see what other designers have used. So here we go. I'm quite happy with that. And then I might decide that my H2 and H3 will have, the same font. And that might be, let's have a quick look. Sorry, I've just haven't zoomed correctly. So what we've got here for Roboto slab, we've got semi-bold at 600 and black at 900, and we want to use them in 2 different ways. So with our H1, let's make that the 900. That's what we'd want to do. So we would say font weight 900. Let's see if that changes it. I'm not sure if it has really. But for this one, we'll copy all of this. Oh, goodness. Sorry, it's very sensitive, Codepen. There we go. So I've copied that. I'm going to paste it in here, but in this case, rather than 900, the font weight I'm going to use is 600. And hopefully that will change. There we go. You should have seen the weight change in there. And of course you can also change the font size. So let's make this H1 a whopping big piece of text. So here, zooming in again, font size. And there's a number of ways you can specify. You can use pixels, so I might say 40 pixels. And there we go, that's resized it. Hopefully you can see that. However, the problem with this is that then it's very difficult to resize for different purposes. So most web designers use M. M is based on whatever the body text default is. Now the body text default, I believe, is 16 pixels. That's pretty small, to be honest. So let's set font size here to be something like 24 pixels. Okay, and you can see how everything resizes accordingly. So our font size, but the first one didn't. This one did not, because I'd already specified it to be 40 pixels. So instead, we're going to use a measurement called M. So I might say, I think by default it's something like 3M, so 2M. So I'm going to say 3M, and we'll see. There we go. M is a typographic term, and basically it is the width of an M character, a lowercase m character. And that makes it a standard measurement across the different fonts to say, okay, base this size around the M size. Now, just to be complicated, in web design, there is also rem, and most modern fonts, modern browsers, can deal with it. But do you see how that shrunk the size? Because that's looking at root. I won't go into the technical details of it, but it would still be reading the HTML standard, which is 16 pixels. So if I stick to M, that inherits whatever tags it's between, in this case the body tags, and it becomes 3 times the size we specified here, 24 pixels. And you can do the same with the H2, H3. Now, of course, I wouldn't give H2 and H3 the same value. They need to have a different information hierarchy. So I might say H2 font size and say 2M. Let's have a look. Yep. And H3 font size, I might say 1.4M. See what happens there. Yeah, it's a little bit too big. I'm just going to go maybe 1.2M. There we go. Okay, so this gives us a structure to our information. It gives us a little bit of an information hierarchy, and you can see how you can combine serif and sans serif fonts so that they complement each other nicely, but they all work together. Don't use more than 2 font families on a page, please, because then it gets really, really messy and confusing. So the things we've covered today are going to Google Fonts and finding the appropriate fonts that you need, adding them within the settings in the Stuff for Head section of, where are we? Oh, sorry, it's not scrolling up for some reason, but in the HTML editor part of it. Okay, we've also learned how to then add the selector you need in the CSS, add the font family that is provided by Google, and add your own fallback fonts just to make sure you're not relying on the style and good taste of a browser. We've also learned how to change the font size of both the body, the basic text, and then relatively for the headings, so that you can base it around that original style. And we've shown how you can use different font weights. So that's a lot to learn. 95% of web design is typography, and so this will give you a magnificent head start of creating a beautiful web design.